Hey there guys, welcome back to another deck profile with yours truly, Paul Reissmann. Today we are taking a look at Son Goku himself, the Monkey King born from stone.
Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, and to our guest lecturer members, Vite Ramen. Class is in session.
This ruler saw absolutely no play. But as someone who has pretty much all of the Dragon Ball Z manga, etc., and as someone who absolutely loves the Journey to the West, this was an easy pick for me. Plus, I know there are some people in the community who really stand this guy, but, you know, at the end of the day, he just never saw his day in the sun until now. He's got some really interesting tools going ahead, and he's not super special in terms of everything that he can do, so they gave him a lot of main deck support. So he's got a will sync for a green to search your deck for a flying cloud, to put it into your hand and then shuffle your deck. Don't worry, flying cloud is really going to come into play later. His judgment gets cheaper if you have Sha Wujing and Zhu Baji onto the field, and then if you enter, you can search for another Sha Wujing or another Zhu Baji relatively easily. And then for a 0 cost activate ability, you can put a flying cloud from your hand into the field, and then you'll have to bestow it with its own abilities. But for the good news is we can just play these cards for free. Let's then get into what the Regalia does. So the Regalia sub-ruler is really helpful in terms of fixing a lot of the Sun Wukong issues. Rather than just simply errating every card to be good, they gave us a card that allows them to be good. So on its sub-ruler side, which is, you know, if you're going first, you're going to be getting this effect. Whenever a J/Resonator leaves the field, if that J/Resonator had counters, they will then go onto this card, which is really helpful. You can remove X +1/+1 counters to put that same amount on a target J/Resonator, and if you do, and X is 3, you draw a card. It's not 3 or more, it's exactly 3. So just be aware of that. You can produce a green to play myth spells, so not just resonators, but myth spells. Cards named Flying Cloud or the activate abilities of your Monkey King. So this is really good for playing any of your myth, anything in the main deck, also getting your Flying Clouds out for free, and then also searching out those Flying Clouds relatively easily. And then if you want to continually cycle for that same Flying Cloud, you can draw a card and then put a card from your hand on the bottom of the deck, which is really helpful if you want to just cycle your Flying Clouds looking for additional cards. So it's really helpful to have that. Very reminiscent of Reflect and Refrain, if you may notice. Those folks tend to be friends with the Monkey King in the actual lore here. On the Regalia side, and we are playing 3 in the main board because this card is actually really good. Whenever a J Resonator leaves the field, that counters effect, that counters maintenance is still on here. The draw card effect is still on here for when you move those counters to other J/Resonators. You can still produce green for your Myth spells, Flying Cloud, and your Monkey King activate abilities. But then you get a God's Art. If you control Monkey King in its name, that's the ruler side. J/Resonators you control gain +3/+3 until end of game. That's pretty good. Not gonna lie, it's pretty good. Ugh, excuse me guys, allergies are in season. So the Staff of the Monkey King is really good. It allows you to just have, in general, access to additional cards and just buff your field for the rest of the game, which is really relevant because some of these cards have subpar stats for their cost line. Their CMC at the time that they were released, you know, an 8/7 for 3 was relatively okay. But some things are just better left in the past. Sorry, buddy. This is one of my favorite cards from the CFC set in Lapis Cluster. Absolutely loved Sha Wujing when he came out. Let's take a look at the main deck, and let's look at turn 1 specifically. We are looking at Rejones. Did you know that Rejones is a myth? Yeah, it is. It's a divine beast, a myth, and a spirit, which means that we can reduce the cost of this thing relatively easily. It also is really nice to just have Monkey King gain access to additional stones relatively easily. Plus, you can double the amount of +1/+1 counters on this card. If these cards ever leave, then your staff is just going to have a ton of different +1/+1 counters on it. So this card is really, really great. Plus, it's got that neat barrier that anything that is not fire. So that's just really great. Plus, you can find additional copies of this for 1 black. So we are base black for running regions specifically. Just this card seems absolutely amazing. I saw this card with Wukong and knew immediately I needed to play this card. We're also playing the Palm of Buddha. So on the Palm of Buddha is really helpful because you can just have X be 0 if you would like. The additional cost will then just allow you to get any of your myths from the deck. I'm not sure why they necessarily worded it this way, but this gives you access to some of the other myths in the game that are a little bit more expensive. The chant, though, is not a myth, so just be aware you cannot use the staff to pump into this X effect. So you search for a non-chant myth card with total cost X plus 3 or less, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. If you have Wukong, it gains quick cast, and then the additional effect is you may discard a card named Flying Cloud to then put that card into the field with a +1/+1 counter on it. Very, very helpful. This is a non-chant mono attribute win myth with total cost X plus 3. So you can just outright tutor your rezones, you just won't be able to put it into the field. But for every other myth in your deck, you can just discard a cloud and put it into the field. This card is absolute gas. This is probably one of the main reasons why, besides the staff, that Wukong actually has decent support right now. Of course, we're playing a couple of the buddies Sha Wu Jing and Zhu Baji. These are going to add some stacks to the field, allowing your, making it so that your opponent, or I guess in the way they're framing it now for ABC stuff, each other player will gain a cost based on whether or not they're playing additions and regalia with Zhu, and if you're playing Jia, it's going to be an additional will to play chant spells. They also give some additional abilities to your Monkey King, because of course they will. +2/+2 in precision for Sha Wujing, and then swiftness for Zhujiabaji, and +2/+2 from them as well. Tang San Zhang, or as I know him from the epic Tripitaka, this is an amazing enabler for Wukong. So what this does is it not only searches out copies of itself or cloning magic, it actually gives the Monkey King another win condition. Actually, honestly, I think this is probably the primary win condition. So what this does is when you search for cloning magic, you can pay 1 less for that after you establish a second Tang Zazang. Then you just start casting cloning magic on your 1 Tang Zazang, which will then tap to give +1/+1 counters on everything else. It will then remove those 2 counters, which then puts them onto your staff, I believe, and then it recovers, plus recovering your other Tang, and then you just go back and forth forever until these things have infinite +1/+1 counters. Cloning magic says anytime an activate ability would be activated on this resonator, it will double those instead. So this card is actually kind of cracked, the fact that it can just find cloning magic and do ridiculous things. We're playing 3 Staff of the Monkey God in the main board. And just clarifying here, those +1/+1 counters won't go to this card, unfortunately. That's unfortunate, but whatever. We have a Frigg. Frigg is in here because she's one of the classic myths. I was considering playing Odin in early builds because I just think there's something funny about plopping down an Odin and just having double the mana your opponent has. But Frigg is here just to kind of recycle. You can put up to 1 target Resonator, 1 addition, and up to 1 target chant from your graveyard into your hand. This card is just there to help us recycle. Honestly, you could even turn this into a Horn if you wanted to. But I love Frigg. I mean, look at this art. This art is just absolutely fantastic. And she's a myth, and she fit the theme. Probably could just be a Horn, though. Let's be real. I'm playing 3 Flying Cloud. I needed a little extra room, and that extra room went to just playing the Frigg, just as a way of recycling some things. But Flying Cloud at 3 is perfectly fine. 4 is probably relevant a lot more than I would like to admit, but 3 definitely just felt comfortable. We have 4 Ferrous spells and 3 number 13 anti-magic. These are really good cancels that get cheaper because we're ramping stones, so this card is eventually going to be free. Ferrous spell is just going to be the classic, hey, just cancel a thing that is quick cast for 1. Very, very good. Same thing for Kilo, a Fossil Girl in the City. Destroy additions, stop automatic triggers, and if you really want to, draw extra cards. I mean, this card is just a draw card if you need it to be. Very helpful for you in that way. The deck really struggled at some point, as some of you mentioned, and some of you saw, with Constantino. Oh my gosh, gosh, you'll see it in Jeremy's version of the deck profile for Millium, I'm sure, but I needed ways to get rid of Constantino. This deck has literally no outs to that card, so I had to play some cards, including one of my favorites, Ultra Magic Stone Golem. This is why we have a diversity stone list, just to be able to just say, hey, come down, blow this stuff up, call it a day. It can be bought back with Frigg. It's really useful for that. Plus, it's unless my opponent has exactly mirror, this card can be sometimes really hard to prevent from occurring. So it's just a 20/20. Plus, on top of that, we're playing Riding on the Storm. This card is probably never seen play outside of maybe draft, but I thought this card was actually really useful in the sense that it's a 2-drop, so it gets around mirror. Plus, it divides damage to your opponent's board based on the stuff you have on the field. I'm already pretty high in terms of attack points, and if I just even play an Ultra Magic Stone Golem, I can divide 2,000 damage up to my opponent's board. That seems pretty good. We'll see an alternative in Paradox format if you need one. Magic Stone deck is going to be the Crown Stone, a couple of Darkness Moon fragments. I'm not nearly as reliant on Magic Stone types in this deck, except against exactly Millium. We're playing a couple of Black Silence, a couple of Blasting Waves, a Chaos Moon Secret Stone, and then 2 of the Ruby of Lichen Blood. In the side deck, of course, we have our Staff. We have a Shiva, which is really helpful to get around some of the things like Constantino, Fire Pit Trap, and we also do have Rogue Spectator, and then 3 5-Finger Mountain. This is really helpful for slowing down those aggro decks, which this deck really likes to get around. I would consider Wukong to be more of a mid-range rather than any sort of like big aggressive deck. 5-Finger Mountain is just a really good way of slowing your opponent down in green. Moving on to Paradox format. Excuse me. We have Rejones again, and we have a few other cards that we do not get access to anymore. Things like Ultra Magic Stone Golem. However, we do have access to Wu Jia Wu Hard Worker in Power Suit. This guy is pretty great. Players cannot chase to this card as long as you have Build or Demolish. Well, you don't have Build or Demolish in this deck, so they can chase it. However, it's really helpful for just coming in, dealing a bunch of damage to each GA Resonator your opponent controls, where X is the combined number of magic stones each player controls, multiplied by 2. You'll draw an extra card, and then whenever this card destroys a GA Resonator during battle, you recover this card. So basically, if it doesn't die, I'm just going to run it over anyway. And I'll just keep doing that over and over and over again until your field is completely clear. Very fun card. Something I was actually considering for the Wanderer version. I know there have been a lot of people who are saying this card is absolute gas right now. So definitely keep an eye on this guy. He's really good. Belligerent Precision comes in, blows up the board, draws you a card, attacks over things. It's a fun time. We do have access to Sword of Progression. We don't have access to Ferrous Spell in Paradox format, but we do have Sword of Progression. That's a really good substitute. This was actually something I was considering in the initial builds of the deck, but this is just a little bit slower. You have to draw a card and then you get access. Your other 3 copies then become cancel spells. So just be aware, Sword of Progression, very good card. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's just not quite what I was looking for in the Wanderer format, but it's very good for Paradox. We also then have Council Grove of the Dark Forest. If your your Wukong dies, you do have access to this card. You can double the number of counters on stuff like Rejones, or even some of the stuff that got put back onto your staff and redistributed. It blows up your opponent's Water J Resonators, really good against Ruchil, or other, actually we don't even have Ruchil in Paradox format, but if there are other Water J/Resonators your opponent is playing, this is a good way of getting rid of those. Even cards that have flying get just completely wiped out by this card. And it helps you ramp additional stones as well, which is kind of the core idea behind Rejones as well. You're just making more stones, which is just helpful. We are playing 4 of the Killing Stone. This is your green-black stone in Paradox format. Unfortunately, it does drain you a little bit of life, but we have something in the stone deck that can help with that as well. I'm playing a couple Magic Stone of the Remnants. It is just green and gives me access to more red if I need it. We also still playing Ruby of Lichen Blood for all of the colors mentioned here. We are playing Resin Drop of the Fallen Tree. This is a good way to, later in the game, as you find yourself losing all of your different main deck monsters into the graveyard. This is a good way of kind of buying back and insulating yourself from just getting blown out of the game. And then we still have access to the Crown Stone. We're playing a 5-finger mount in the sideboard for those aggro matchups, and I think this version of the deck is going to be really interesting to see if it ever gets actual play in Paradox format. The deck is maybe a little bit more accessible, a little bit more resilient, because there are things that are not in Paradox format that you would normally see in things like the Wanderer format. So we'll see how this goes overall. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below, and while you're there, hit subscribe, hit that like button if you like the like button. Give me a comment about what you think of Wuxia Wu. Is Goku finally going to do what he needs to do in the game of Force of Will, or is he still missing some things? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Ring that bell, and until next time, guys, this has been Paul saying class is dismissed.